Hello everyone, are you able to hear me? Yes. Hi, how are you? My name is Mina Wasfi. I'm the head of career development at Curious. I live in Dubai, and my panel today is pretty global as well. We come from different parts of the world. And if you were looking for an opportunity to have a look out of the window at what's happening in talent space, globally speaking, then this conversation is going to be very relevant to you. I'm going to do a really quick round of introduction for the panel members. You're going to get to know more about them as the conversation proceeds. So with me today is Nicole. Nicole has flew all the way from Florida. Chris, thank you for being here from the UK. Kobi, thank you for coming from the Netherlands. And then Anne, pretty much everywhere. 64 countries, right? And let's dive straight into it. Anne, you've been working with businesses in the HR space for the past I think 30 years, right? Since 1996, you've been
27 years this year.
27 years, fantastic. And you've been speaking with a lot of employers. You've seen a lot of challenges on the talent front. How would you summarize the problem? What is it that we're trying to solve today?
Well, basically, these employers that are our clients, they're finding it difficult to find the best talent. That's probably sometimes because they're in one location and the best talent isn't based in that location. Therefore, they need to look further afield and employ people in other locations, but then they have the challenge that they don't have the companies in those locations to employ these workers. Also, their HR departments are not always knowledgeable about international HR or the labour laws in each country. They're all different. The payroll legislation in every country is different. So the HR departments are finding it difficult to also manage these people that are employed in different countries.
And how would you relate in the light of what Move Group is doing? How would you relate to the earlier discussion, the previous panel? They were talking about offices and remote work and all. Because one of the things you mentioned is the problem is kind of operational or logistical, right?
Yeah.
Legal sometimes. How would you say remote working is empowering businesses to solve that problem?
Well, basically, I was saying last night that as an organisation, we've always had many workers of our employees working remotely. I actually started the company working in a broom cupboard. That was my first office. So I set up we had a broom cupboard in our apartment, and I set up in there with a desk and a computer, a chair, and a fax machine in those days, actually. In 1996, actually, there wasn't any internet. But over the years, we've always, we've had offices in different locations, but always kept them shared office space. So we were used to, when the pandemic happened, we were all ready to work from home. I think it's good for some employees to like to spend some time connecting with other people, so they like to work on a hybrid basis. Other people prefer to work at home. I think it's up to the individual really, and it's important that companies are flexible in how they allow where they allow their employees to work.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. And Kobi, now I want to go to you, because one of the things that Anne mentioned in the beginning of her answering the previous question was that one of the main challenges is finding talent. You've been operating in the talent acquisition space for the past 22 years, I believe, right? And you're about to take on the new role in Heineken. Congratulations on that. As a talent acquisition professional, what do you have to comment on this challenge of finding the right talent, and how would you define it?
I think one of the previous speakers mentioned as well. We have companies who traditionally look at a certain demographic when it comes to talent. And I do believe, the last couple of years, you have much more communities that companies can tap into. So for me, it's educating companies, which communities they can tap into. For example, I'm here today on behalf of OMAC, because OMAC is a bicultural community of African descent. we see a lot of young talent in Africa, but also in Europe, who are not getting opportunities at companies, and we don't really understand the reason why. I believe it's an educational part that needs to happen, but I believe companies need to tap into different communities to have an advantage when it comes to talent.
In the book Global Class, I read a section, very interesting stuff, about being an entrepreneur with an I. And entrepreneurship is defined as the ability or the mindset to think as an entrepreneur whilst being part of an organization. So it's not your own business that you're running, it's not your own show, you're being part of the show, but you still come with this perspective of, I see a problem, I'm gonna do whatever it takes, I'm gonna own that problem and see how I can play a role in solving it. My question to you is, speaking of talent mobility, generally and globally, of course, how would you say businesses can empower this entrepreneurial mindset in order for them to solve the problem of finding talent?
Well, I think first of all, you need to be able to facilitate internal mobility within your company, respectively, which means there needs to be a percentage of what everybody is doing dedicated to projects, stretch assignments. You need to be able to facilitate that. And with that mindset, leadership needs to help, right? Because if I'm working for a commercial team and you're working, on the finance team, there is also always a war of, well, I want to keep my talent here. But what we've seen, especially when it comes to the young generation of talent, what they'll look for is to learn as much as possible in the different disciplines, especially if they're passionate about it. They don't always get the opportunity to start in a role that they want. I'm lucky that I'm in HR and I in television because that's what I want to do. But a lot of people that you speak to, they studied something and then I'm doing totally something else. So I do believe leaders need to help facilitate within a respective organization for talent to be able to move around or construct a center on a consistent basis, especially if we know there's also a gap for skill set within a respective organization.
Very interesting. Chris, allow me to ask you a question, thinking of that. You're chair of CMS Global, if I'm not mistaken, and that puts you as a senior leader. Hearing that, and let me give a makeup story now. You have someone in your organization, your C-suite, you're a senior leader, you have someone in your organization, and then they're interested in participating to another project in a different reporting line or in a different department, right? In different focus. And then they go like, Chris, I'd like to have 25-30% of my time focusing on that other project, and I'm just going to give you the 70-75%. What would be your thoughts on that?
Thank you. That would be the first thing. I really want people who want to do stuff. It's important for people to be expressing themselves in what they do. It allows them to be authentic, to have enthusiasm, to have energy, and it gives drive and focus to the whole organisation when someone really wants to do something. We'd say a volunteer is worth 10 people who are pressed into doing something. So if somebody wants to do something, boy, do I support them and encourage them. There are limits, of course. You can't always give everything. It's a complex organisation. You have to manage resources. But in principle, a culture of entrepreneurialism and entrepreneurialism, as you said, is, for me, a culture of success.
And I'm hearing that leaders need to adapt the same mindset. So it's not only about me empowering younger generations, adapting this entrepreneurial mindset, but now what I'm hearing is the talent is giving back to the organization in my capacity or in a different capacity, as long as they're able to contribute. This is for everybody's good, right?
We want the widest possible expression of talent. When our clients come to us and ask for our support, they don't tend to want a guy who can do it personally just as one thing. They want someone who can look at the thing in the round, take a business-like commercial view of it, understand and everybody in every organization is in HR. So they need someone who will look at the thing in the round, the human aspects of it, the financial aspects of it, the legal and regulatory and all of that. And in the end, we need people who are putting themselves authentically into it so that they can feel and respond to every part of it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Nicole, now a question to you. Let's talk about the talent themselves. In that same story, I come to Chris and I ask Chris for part of my time to go do something else. In your opinion, because I also picked on the word enthusiasm, what would you say is motivating younger workforce? What's driving them? What is their purpose?
So younger workforce is more socially driven. So they're more driven towards purpose, more driven towards companies and organizations that have this community involvement, that have these philanthropic avenues that they are looking for, and they're going to stay at an organization that promotes those values, those missions, and they're also going to work harder for an organization that they believe in. They're going to work harder in an organization that promotes the same kind of ideals and values that they have. So you're going to get more volunteers to do that extra 25% if they believe in the organization. If you haven't set your organization up for belief and with a purpose and with a mission, those individuals are not going to work. The statistics don't lie when it comes to mental health in the workplace. People who are employees who aren't passionate about what they're doing, they work less. And they have a rough mental health process throughout their employment. Once that employment is there, it drives the employer crazy because they have all these issues that are happening, and then it's just a ripple effect within the organization. So if you have employees that are wanting to work towards something better within the organization, it should be championed by leadership. The way that the younger generation is coming along, if you don't adapt, you're not going to have talent. You're not going to have great talent within your organization. And taking a look at the mental health aspect in your facility.
Wonderful. Adapt. Very well said. Chris, from an ED&I perspective, what would you say organizations need to start adapting to? And my question is coming from a place where younger generations now are more educated, more globalized, more aware, right, more knowledgeable than previous generations, given the globalization, and the age of information and everything. And they started to have concerns. They started to have fears, if I may, right? So what would you say is organizations' role to address that and adapt to that?
I think one of the consequences of what you just described is that they have a very, very high sensitivity to bullshit. They can detect it extremely fast.
Yeah.
And if there's a lot of that in the organization, then the things will not work out well. So you've actually got to find authentic expressions of what the organization is doing, what its objectives are. And if it doesn't smell very good, then they will run away.
Back to what Kobi was saying about transparency.
Yeah. And whereas if you get them not just sensing it, but feeling they're participating in it, it's that kind of inclusion that I really think is important. You have to have diverse entry into your workforce. I have this DIDO principle, diverse in, diverse out. So you have to take in a diverse group of people initially to spread your net of talent as wide as you possibly can, because it's very hard to find the right people for particular things. The wider you look, the more likely you are to succeed. But you then need to give them the opportunity to express themselves and feel that they are engaged with what you're doing. I think that's what people are now looking for. You don't have people who want a quiet career doing the same thing for 30 years and not troubling anybody. You have people who want to change the world, and you have to give them this feeling that can be achieved.
Fantastic. And Kobi, you have been speaking directly to talent, right? Being in talent acquisition for so many years, I think you have seen the change over time, where what kind of questions, what kind of concerns, what kind of priorities do talent have, say 10, 15 years ago, and for the past 5 years? How would you describe that change?
Yeah. So in one of my previous roles, I was responsible for, and I thought it was a very cool name, Next Generation Manager. And my responsibility. A lot of people ask me, who came up with it? I said, I came up with it. But the key thing there was to make sure that younger talent, right, had some kind of engagement with our respective company. Back then I was working for PBH, and for people who don't know, PBH is a company that owns Tommy Hilfiger and Calvin Klein, and we were hiring 250 young talent every 6 months. The 95% of all the talent asked this question: what is your social responsibility when it comes to the planet? Because we all knew that the fashion industry is pollution. So how are you contributing to help limit the pollution? And I thought that was very, eye-opening. If 90% of the talent, coming back to what Nicole also mentioned, they want to know, do you have a sense of purpose? And then you give them back to social or the economy. So I'll say that is what I've seen really change the last couple of years.
And what if organizations disagree with the talent? Like I asked for a given purpose,
Yeah.
and then I asked a few questions in an interview, and then it looks like the organization is not really doing that.
Yeah.
Now, what's in it? This is not my question. My question is going on. Which is, what's in it for you as a talent acquisition professional is to hire a person because we need somebody to play that role, right? And then for the person, they are looking for a purpose, but they're also looking for a job. And now back to what Chris was mentioning around talent really looking for a purpose and organizations looking for diversity. What would you say now is the ultimate solution? If we take this as a little case, we say, I have a talent looking for purpose, but it's not the first priority. They're also looking for, paycheck, whatever, right? Would you say it's a good idea for organizations to just tick the box, we hired somebody?
My answer will be no. And the reason why is we all know there's a shortage of talent, right? So if there's a shortage of talent, it means people have options, right? So if you don't comply, they will go to company B instead of A. So then you need to rethink, okay, how can I make sure I attract the right talent who, from a social perspective, understand what we're trying to accomplish and wants to be part of that. We all know that the young generation is not going to be there for 5 to 6 years and working on one company. But how can we maximize the time that they're with us? That at some point, if they decide to come back to us, they had a great experience with us as an employer. That's what you look for. I think that's an important thing to keep in mind.
This is a wonderful, wonderful challenge because, Anne, what Kobi's describing now is a situation where I'm really trying to hire somebody.
Yeah.
And I'm fighting for it. And I'm trying to figure out all the challenges, right? And how to solve them. And then you and I had a chat over breakfast this morning around the cost of hire versus the cost of retention and internal mobility. So I'm really interested to hear what you have to say about what Kobi just shared. In terms of, would you say organizations need to do more on the internal mobility, on leveraging existing talent more, rather than just fire and hire and fire and hire and fire?
Yeah, I think so. I think you need to find out if someone isn't happy in their position, if they could fit into another position. This has happened within our organization. I have one head of department. She's actually had 3 or even 4 different positions in our company. So she has an all-encompassing knowledge of how we operate. We're very fortunate actually that in our organisation we have 70% of our employees have been with us 10 years plus. So they have a really very experienced knowledge of what we do and the services we can offer. And I'm very happy to hear, like you said, about somebody who wants to spend 25% of their time in a department. I think that's a great idea to learn from each other because, like you said, sometimes you get conflicts between departments because one department has a different mindset, like a creative mindset. Another department might be very focused on what they do. So it's very important that people get the opportunity to work in different departments and learn from each other.
Maybe something that in Japan, the tenure of employees is much more longer. And they also spend time in different departments, not even knowing what the department entails. So from a cultural perspective, Japan has been doing something, which is transcending. And we don't want to give people opportunity because they have no financial skills, so to say, right? So, and I think Nicole mentioned it as well during our conversations. Hey, companies need to make sure they facilitate, but I'll let you touch base on that.
Well, I think when we're looking at internal mobility and we're looking at there's nobody to hire. We have a skill gap. And in the United States, so we have an HR consulting firm and we have a recruiting firm that recruits internationally. And now I'm proud owner of a tech firm. So we have all of that going on. But part of the issues that we find with our clients is that they're like, oh my gosh, we just do not have any talent. There's no skill talent. What COVID did is COVID exited a lot of individuals out of the workspace. And when moving your tenured employees out of the workspace, organizations found that they had this skill gap. And that's what they're freaking out about, is because now we have a skill gap. We have people that exited businesses and industries that we used that talent, but we did not utilize that talent well, because we as organizations did not build infrastructure to be able to sustain a future generation. So we don't have training programs in place. We don't have mentor-menteeship programs established to be able to reverse mentorship. That was something that was mentioned in the first panel with the European Commission. She had mentioned, they do reverse mentoring. So what companies are fearing right now in this skill gap and the internal mobility, okay, if I allow somebody to go 25% into another department, I'm losing 30% of productivity in this department because the infrastructure has not been started. It hasn't been built to carry the organization through. So I coined a term or a saying about lazy hiring. And the reason we talk so much about lazy hiring is I get clients who are like, I need somebody with 7 years of experience. But I present to them somebody who has drive, ambition, will, the ability to learn. And they're like, I don't want nothing to do with them because I don't have time to train them. So the problem isn't so much there's nobody to hire, it's we're scared of that skill gap because we haven't built an infrastructure in our businesses to be able to sustain training individuals. And that's how we're going to get the next generation moving into our organizations. Besides our social and philanthropy, they're going to want to know, how am I going to move within your organization? Kobi, you mentioned earlier about, while we have somebody there at the organization, utilize the talent that we have. I use loyalty and commitment. Loyalty is great. You have a 10-year employee, he's been there for a very long time. I can trust that he's going to show up to work. I can trust that he's going to come get his paycheck. I can trust he's going to work for me whenever I ask him. But when he is there, that loyalty only gives me 50 to 60%. And now I have to hire somebody else to fill in that other 40%. One, they're mentally exhausted. They, problems. But if I can get somebody that's committed 100% for 2 years, that is helping me build my organization and I'm getting revenue off of that 100% commitment, what have I lost? When we talk about retention costs and things like that, but that person, you've built that person for 2 years to be able to contribute to your revenue generation. Whereas the person that's loyal to you for 10 years and only working at 60% is not contributing to your revenue amounts.
Can I chip in on that? One of the few advantages of lockdown has been that we have been able to review entirely our internal mobility programs. Because if you have, let's take an example which isn't a true one, if in Holland we find we have nobody who knows about digital identity, there are two ways to deal with that skills gap. One is you send into Holland someone who knows about digital identity from another country. The other is you take someone from Holland to work in a group which really knows about digital identity and they upskill them. And there's two ways to approach it.
Act like an ambassador of some sort.
Yeah, to create a sort of centre of knowledge, a new centre of knowledge. And thanks to lockdown, you can move people around much more easily than you used to be able to, because a lot of the dead weight cost of moving someone, so they can no longer function in this location, we're going to lose all of their productivity. You don't. They can continue to be just as effective from another country while learning and imbibing from that country, will tend to be giving into that country depending which way you choose to do it. So you've got two new axes of flexibility. You second people in or out, and do you allow them to work really flexibly so that they can continue to contribute where they came from? That's just an upside.
Wonderful. You won't believe that, but we have 4 minutes left for the scheduled conversation before we open for the 10 minutes Q&A. So I think a good time for us. So before I go really quick on the key takeaways and the calls for action, from each of my panelists. I just want to remind everybody, you can go to the app and send us your questions, or we're opening up the floor for questions in a few minutes. And what is Move Group doing in order to help people stay for longer and longer? You said some employees have been staying for 10 years, right?
More than 10 years, some 20.
Oh, what is it that you do? And what would your advice be to business leaders who would like to end up with that culture with committed and loyal employees?
Well, I think we I was saying to you this morning, as an organisation, we see ourselves, well, people who work for us call us the Mo family. So we're very close-knit. We are a family business anyway, but even people from outside the family feel they're part of the Mo family. We always like to feel that we are flexible in what we do. We employed quite a few young ladies, like 10 years ago, who then had children. They came back after they'd had the children. When they're working with young children, we allow flexible hours of working, so they can start, finish around 3 o'clock in the afternoon if they're in the UK to go pick their children up, and then maybe work a few hours in the evening because we have a lot of clients in the US. So I think that's the flexibility they like as well. Also, listening to you then about, we're always changing. We're moving forward all the time, looking at ways of changing the way we do things. I noticed this morning somebody said, I look forward, never back. I think that's something that I do myself. I always look forward, what we're going to do next. I think it's never boring. Our business is so it's never, ever boring, and you never get to the end of your pile of work to do. So I think that keeps people's interest. They never get bored. I think that's really important.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing. Kobi, you're about to start a new role at a global company, looking at talent acquisition. In that situation, what is your P0?
P0. Well, I understood that company for Heineken, so everyone who drinks beer. But it's a traditional company in the Netherlands who doesn't have a lot of innovation in technology. And I wouldn't say that from the outside looking in, but I learned through the process that that's the case. So I hope to bring a lot of innovation when it comes to how we recruit, but also I'm big on D&I when it comes to diversity, cultural diversity. So I'm going to be a big advocate for that as well. We employ, especially in the Netherlands, around 800 people on an annual basis. So let's make sure we open up the pool for different communities to be part of that. I'm big on that.
Fantastic. Chris, we have been speaking earlier about initiatives that you are very enthusiastic about. Could you tell us about that, please?
Sure, thank you. My daughter made a speech at the United Nations a few years ago, and she said, if she borrowed Mandela's words, if not now, when? If not me, who? And that set me going on the he for she line. And that's taken me into doing a lot of work as a straight ally in the LGBTI plus community. I'm now the co-chair of the Investment Leadership Council of the IBA. But that was triggered really by the fact that I had brought up this very diverse and inclusive person who fed it back to me. And I realized that we're all connected as a result. So I'm really enthused about things which increase the internal connection. John Donne, no man is an island entire unto himself. Every man's death diminishes me because I'm involved in mankind. Alternatively, Douglas Adams said, if you want something to disappear and be invisible, just make it somebody else's problem. It is not somebody else's problem. We must all do it for ourselves, and organizations become healthy and authentic.
Wonderful. You want to say, you want to share an action for everybody to work for the business leaders who want to end up with a more diverse talent, but also more relevant talent, and be able to reach this talent and close that gap. If you had one thing to tell them, given your experience with men, what would that be?
I would say one is open and adapted to change. We all say that we are, but we're not when we're faced with, hurting budgets, economic crisis. We just have to get things out. We think that we're in good shape, but we're not. And having checking as a leader, checking your own mental health to be able to lead your teams is huge. Because if you're not leading your teams well, your teams aren't going to lead your organization well, and it's going to hurt your bottom line at the end of the day. Everything comes back to money, and if you don't check you at the door, then it's going to trickle down to your organization. If you say that you're DE&I focused, but you're not, they smell the bullshit. They're going to see it. You're going to lose talent. You're going to hurt your reputation. If you say that you promote these certain types of social aspects and you don't do it, they're going to see you as a leader that does not lead change whatsoever. Our society is moving very fast into a more remote. We've talked a lot here about AI, and we're moving into a lot more tech-based programs that are going to help drive. It is going to be harder to get talent on the ground. So as a leader, you have to be at the top of your game in order to lead adequately and be who you say you are. And I think that that's the takeaway that I hope that everybody takes away and out of our conversation is the next generation is looking to you to help them facilitate the change that they want to make in this world.
I have a question actually coming from the audience, very relevant to that. I would be happy to have your thoughts on it, Nicole,
Okay.
and then everybody else, if you have something to share, that would be lovely. The question is, any advice for companies hiring inexperienced remote staff that need training?
Well, I think first you have to build the training. Yeah, what are you training? What are you training programs? Are you training software? Are you training on your individual? When I started my business, what we did is every new task, we built an SOP for it. So, and each of our clients has their own SOP, which is standard operating procedure for how we run those clients. So when I have a new individual that comes on board, it's here's our SOP for this client, here's our company SOPs, let's meet, let's talk, because my entire team is remote. We have been fully remote since COVID, and it's been phenomenal. We maintain our relationships. We haven't had the in-person issues that a lot of people highlight. And so it's about building the infrastructure to be able to train. If you don't know what you're training, everybody's going to be apart. If you don't set up meetings to have conversations with your teams, you are going to lose your remote teams. But at the end of the day, it is about building your training and knowing what you're doing with it.
Can I add that I think hard skills can be taught remotely. Soft skills are very, very hard to teach remotely. You can do a split program, so you teach the hard skills remotely and have the soft skills face-to-face to induct people and get them working with the team. That is a better outcome.
So by remotely, Chris, you don't necessarily mean e-learning, as in self-paced learning. You mean even online delivery or online learning,
even online.
virtual.
Yeah.
That's also not a good idea for soft skills.
It's not ideal. It's better than e-learning, but it's not as good as face-to-face.
Any other thoughts, or should we move to the next questions? We got 5 questions. That's on the app. I'm not sure about the room.
I have one question.
Yes, please.
I have a lot of young people that I'm mentioning. And given that you come back from a background in PH and fashion particularly, they say it's a very toxic culture, right? So there's a lot of turnaround, they have a passion to be in that industry, they want to learn, they want to grow, but there is no opportunity to grow because of the culture. Do you have any views on that?
Sure. I was part of that culture when we really don't have in. And it's a little bit detrimental to the fashion industry. But so I worked for example, at Nike as well. I was 8 years there and 6.5 at PVH. I found that Nike is much more a competitive environment compared to a PVH, where it's much more, behind the elbows. But it is something that I believe, when a few new people were in place, they're trying to address that. There also a lot of people during COVID who said, hey, this is not for me, I want to do something else. But at the end of the day, it's all about the leaders, and I can tell you, not highly confidential because you know now, but a lot of not so great leaders are not part of that organization.
I have a question. Is there any question in the room first? Yes, please.
I'd like to challenge Matt, if I may, which was where does grit and perseverance fit into leadership? There is a level of sensitivity today that we can't be strong leaders and perhaps even have a severe or abrupt discussion with employees, but we need a soft touch all along. I come from a school which is probably well out of date, but I personally believe that grit and that perseverance and the ability to lead with power and confidence, even when you make mistakes, you can apologize for them. And I'm keen to have a feedback on whether that exists in society.
Yeah, take that. Was everybody able to hear the question? First of all, no. The question is basically about perseverance and leadership. And the question, more of a challenge, is around why do we always need leaders to have a soft touch with talent, and what's wrong with like being more strict or like hold the ground when it comes to some given or some expectations, and then expect talent to abide by them. Did I summarize that properly?
Yes,
Well, I think it goes to leadership emotional intelligence and being able to identify staff that you can be more abrupt with, more straightforward, more brash, versus staff who takes criticism a little differently. And so you have, as a leader, your emotional intelligence is generally supposed to be higher than the employees that you work with, because you're dealing with much more personality than a direct employee generally does. So emotional intelligence plays a huge role in how you handle any of this. I was always the type of employee, just give it to me straight. Like, don't beat around the bush, just tell me what I did wrong and let me move on. However, when I became a leader, I had to be very careful, because the way that I come across was, Nicole, why are you so mad at me? Like, why do you, like, what did I do to you? I was like, I'm just telling you, like, there's no reason. And I had to learn how to address other individuals. So I do believe that you can be with certain employees, but knowing your staff, and there's obviously assessments that help, global assessments that you can take within an organization, to know everybody's communication, like how people communicate and receive information. And I think that helps a lot in trying to navigate the sensitivities. Now, hands down, you are going to have employees that are way more sensitive than other employees, and you're looking at it like when my daughter cries, I'm like, why are you crying? Like, I don't understand. And we just have to be very intelligent and emotional about how that person is receiving what we're saying.
Again, can I chip in? Part of this is a learning process. Culture eats strategies and breakfast, and the culture of organizations is extremely powerful. And how you treat learning of knowledge and personal development is very cultural. So if someone comes from a culture where it's very soft and feedback is so gentle you hardly notice it, and they come into somewhere which is cleaner and crisper, then there's going to be a learning process. I've been going through it recently with someone who joined, they've nearly left after the first 4 weeks. And now, 6 months on, I'm giving her a first review, and it's going to be really positive, and she'd let me know that it's been really positive for her. So part of this is an acclimatization process. It doesn't have to be bang, force hits a wall. It's a gentle, organic thing.
There are so many questions coming in through the app, and I would assume that still a few people are also curious, but unfortunately we're out of time, so please come and find the panelists during the break. Please catch up with them, connect with them, ask your questions. There are really good questions on the app. I really hope we had more time, but allow me to thank my panelists. So Nicole, you are the founder and CEO of Managing Chart. Thank you very much for flying all the way from Florida to be with us.
Absolutely, thank you.
Chris, thank you so much for being here. You're the chair of CMS Global. Thank you very much for being here. Kobi, congrats again on the new job at Heineken, leading talent acquisition in the Netherlands. And Anne, founder and CEO of Move Group, thank you again for being here. Thank you so much. Come find us in the group.
Thank you.
Thank you.